man can make is ignoring the early signs of disrespect. These signs are often subtle at first: a sarcastic remark disguised as a joke, dismissive body language, interruptions when you speak, or a general disregard for your time and effort. While society often encourages men to be tolerant, to keep the peace, or to give others the benefit of the doubt, there is a major cost to constantly overlooking these behaviors. Respect isn't something that suddenly disappears in a relationship. It erodes slowly, and it starts with the things you choose to excuse in the beginning. A confident man learns to observe without reacting emotionally. He doesn't immediately confront or retaliate at every slight, but he also doesn't let disrespect pass unnoticed. He sees it for what it is, an early indicator of how a woman views him, and, perhaps more importantly, how she expects him to view himself. If you're constantly making excuses for her behavior or telling yourself it's not a big deal, you're not being patient. You're ignoring your instincts. The way a woman treats you when she thinks you're not paying attention is exactly how she feels. Don't let charisma, beauty, or emotional attachment blind you to that reality. A driven cycle. Most men are conditioned to think that if they're just a bit more patient, more understanding, or more forgiving, things will naturally improve. But relationships, like any human dynamic, operate on patterns. If you allow disrespect to go unchecked at the beginning, it sets the tone. You're teaching her how to treat you. If you're the type to swallow every insult and brush off every inconsiderate action, you become complicit in your own mistreatment. The message becomes clear. He doesn't value himself enough to demand better. And once that message is internalized by the other person, regaining respect becomes an uphill battle. Now, this doesn't mean you need to react aggressively or confront every minor issue with hostility. In fact, confident men do the opposite. They handle disrespect with calm, composed certainty. They let their presence and absence speak volumes. When a woman disrespects you, especially in the early stages, the most powerful move is to slightly withdraw, not as a game or manipulation, but as a natural reaction to a shift in behavior. You're simply choosing not to invest in someone who doesn't reflect your standards back to you. This form of silent self-respect creates a boundary without the need for a dramatic conversation. And you recognize disrespect early, you protect your self-worth before it's chipped away. You send a powerful message, not just to her, but to yourself, that your peace of mind, your energy, and your time are not up for negotiation. A man who respects himself isn't desperate to hold on to someone who treats him poorly. He doesn't chase apologies or beg for understanding. He simply stops showing up where he isn't valued. This kind of clarity doesn't come from arrogance or coldness. It comes from experience and discipline. It's easy to react emotionally when you feel hurt or rejected, but restraint is a higher form of power. Recognizing red flags doesn't mean jumping to conclusions or assuming the worst in everyone. It means having enough awareness to understand patterns of behavior and enough confidence to walk away when they don't align with your values. The truth is, the more you ignore small signs of disrespect, the bigger those signs become over time. What starts as eye-rolling turns into yelling. What begins as passive-aggressive comments turns into full-blown contempt. The longer you tolerate disrespect, the more normalized it becomes, and by the time you decide to finally speak up, the damage is often done. That's why recognizing these red flags early is crucial, not just to protect your heart, but to protect your identity as a man who knows his worth. The most powerful men in the world, whether in business, leadership, or relationships, have one thing in common. They do not tolerate disrespect. They don't give repeated access to people who undermine them. They don't seek approval from people who constantly test their boundaries. And they certainly don't allow themselves to be slowly diminished by someone who doesn't appreciate them. So if you want to build the foundation of true confidence, it starts here. Pay attention to how people treat you when they have no reason to impress you. Watch how a woman reacts when you set a small boundary. Listen to your gut when something feels off. And most importantly, respect yourself enough to walk away from the start rather than waiting until the damage is irreversible. Because the man who can recognize disrespect early and act accordingly is the man who never has to beg for respect later. A man who constantly explains himself is unknowingly giving away his power piece by piece. It might feel like you're being honest, open, or communicative, but the truth is that when you're repeatedly justifying your actions, defending your words, or trying to convince someone, especially a woman who disrespects you, that your intentions are good, you're showing that you're seeking her approval more than you're standing on your values. And that subtle energy shift, she feels it even if you don't realize you're doing it, and it immediately changes how she sees you. There's a massive difference between communicating with clarity and begging for validation. Confident men don't argue for their worth. They don't turn every disagreement into a debate just to prove they were right. They speak once clearly, directly, and let the strength of their conviction stand on its own. They understand that anyone who truly respects them doesn't need 3 paragraphs of explanation just to accept a boundary or decision. Respect doesn't require a defense. It requires presence. The reason many men fall into this habit of over-explaining is rooted in fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of conflict, fear of losing someone's affection. But here's the hard truth. If a woman disrespects you, no amount of explaining will fix that. In fact, the more you try to defend yourself, the more power you give her to question you. It becomes a cycle where you're always reacting, always trying to get back in her good graces, always proving something. And the longer you stay in that loop, the more exhausted and resentful you become. What confident men do differently is simple. They state their boundaries and decisions with calm certainty, then move forward without waiting for applause. They don't give long speeches about why they feel the way they feel. They know that someone who values them doesn't need convincing. If she's emotionally mature, she'll respect your clarity. If she's not, she'll test your patience with endless challenges to your authority and self-worth. And that's your signal to reevaluate her place in your life, not to explain yourself more. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming emotionally sovereign. A man who knows his direction in life doesn't have time to micromanage someone else's reactions. He doesn't perform emotional gymnastics to make someone feel okay about the standards he holds. He moves with a sense of inner peace that says, I know what I believe, I know what I expect, and I'm not going to dilute either just to avoid tension. When you stop explaining yourself all the time, something powerful happens. You become unpredictable in a good way. You're no longer constantly trying to fix how others perceive you. You're simply living according to your principles, and that alone commands a level of respect most people aren't used to encountering. Women especially feel this shift. When a man doesn't seek their approval in every interaction, they're drawn to him because he seems grounded, steady, untouchable by drought. And let's be honest, some women test men, not out of malice, but to see where your backbone is. If every time she questions you, you fall into long justifications and emotional explanations, she learns she can control the narrative. But when you answer calmly and don't spiral into defense mode, she's forced to sit with her own behavior. She sees that she can't manipulate the frame of the conversation. And whether she admits it or not, she respects that. Because deep down, women crave a man who stands his ground, not a man who pleads for acceptance. That's why the moment you stop over-explaining is the moment you start building real strength. You conserve your energy, you speak with more impact, and you command more respect without ever needing to demand it. People pay closer attention to those who don't feel the need to speak constantly. Silence, when used wisely, is a tool of power. So, the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause, ask yourself, am I clarifying something necessary, or am I trying to be liked? If it's the latter, breathe and let it go. Trust that your value doesn't need to be defended, it needs to be lived. because when you stop needing to be understood all the time, you finally begin to understand who you really are. When a man begins to truly respect himself, one of the first things he naturally does is create clear boundaries. And what separates confident men from those who constantly find themselves stuck in toxic dynamics is not just that they set boundaries, but that they maintain them without guilt, fear, or apology. A boundary isn't a punishment, it's a standard. It's a line that says, this is how I expect to be treated. Cross it, and you won't have access to me in the same way. So many men struggle with the idea of setting boundaries, especially in romantic relationships. They're afraid of being called controlling or too harsh or too emotionally unavailable. But here's what most don't realize. When you fail to set boundaries, you're not being kind. You're being complicit in your own disrespect. If a woman talks down to you, dismisses your input, manipulates through emotions, or consistently disrespects your time, and you say nothing, you're training her that you'll accept that behavior, and whether it's conscious or not, she'll lose respect for you over time. The most self-assured men in the world don't get loud or aggressive to make a point. They don't threaten or plead. They calmly draw a line and then follow through if it's crossed. It's not about making her feel bad. It's about making sure you stay in integrity with yourself. Because if you don't have boundaries, you don't really have a strong identity. You become whoever she needs you to be in the moment. And in doing so, you lose the core of what made you attractive and respectable to begin with. A boundary might be as simple as letting her know you won't engage in a conversation if it turns disrespectful. It might be choosing to walk away from a woman who constantly belittles your goals or mocks your values. It might be telling her that you won't tolerate emotional manipulation, tears, threats, passive aggression to get her way. Whatever it is, the key is not just saying it, but living it, because boundaries are only as strong as your willingness to enforce them. Now, setting boundaries doesn't mean you have to be cold or emotionally shut off. In fact, it's the opposite. It's about being emotionally aware and mature enough to know what you need, what you will allow, and what you won't. A confident man doesn't fear the discomfort that boundaries sometimes bring. He embraces it, knowing that the short-term tension it might cause is worth the long-term peace and respect it creates. A woman may initially resist when you set boundaries, especially if she's used to getting her way or dealing with men who bend to her moods. But if she's emotionally mature, she will adjust. And if she's not, she'll push harder. That's where your real strength is tested. Do you stick to your standard, or do you fall back into old patterns just to avoid conflict? Or keep her close? Because the truth is, how you handle that moment determines whether she respects you or walks over you. And make no mistake, the moment you create and uphold clear boundaries, her behavior changes. She begins to see you as a man with self-respect, discipline, and direction. She may challenge it, she may question it, but underneath that challenge is something deeper, curiosity, even admiration. She realizes you're not just another man she can manipulate with affection or drama. You're grounded, you're firm, and you won't let her chaos become your norm. This shift isn't just about your relationship with women. It changes how you move through every area of life. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop tolerating one-sided friendships. You stop showing up for people who never show up for you. That inner shift radiates outward. People notice it. They might not say it, but they feel it. And in return, they treat you differently. A boundary is your silent way of telling the world, I take myself seriously, you should too. It's not about being harsh. It's about being clear. It's about choosing self-respect over temporary approval. And when you do that consistently, you no longer chase respect. It starts finding you. One of the most overlooked but powerful ways to handle a woman who doesn't respect you is to control your emotional responses. Most men lose their influence, their power, and ultimately their self-respect, not because they said too little, but because they reacted too much. Emotional control isn't about suppressing your feelings, it's about directing them with intention. The moment you let someone pull you into a whirlwind of emotional reaction, especially someone who's disrespecting you, you've already surrendered control of the situation. When a woman disrespects you, whether it's through sarcasm, passive-aggressive jabs, or open hostility, it can feel like a gut punch. The natural instinct is to defend yourself, to lash out, or to try and fix the situation right there. But in doing that, you immediately validate her behavior by reacting to it. You show her that her words and actions can unbalance you. And no matter how justified you might feel in the moment, what she sees is a man who doesn't have emotional discipline. The confident man, the man who demands respect without ever having to raise his voice, is the one who doesn't flinch when tested. He doesn't get drawn into petty arguments. He doesn't try to win every verbal exchange. He's not trying to be right, he's trying to be respected. And ironically, he wins that respect by not playing the emotional game at all. He chooses silence over shouting, presence over pettiness, and calm over chaos. This kind of control takes time to develop. It takes self-awareness. You have to notice the moment when your heartbeat rises, when your jaw clenches, when you feel the pull to prove a point or fire back a clever insult. And then you pause, you breathe, you remind yourself that true power isn't in reacting, it's in choosing how to respond or whether to respond at all. Emotional control also protects your energy. When you stop feeding drama with your attention, it dies. A woman who thrives on emotional conflict will push harder at first, trying to provoke you, trying to get the reaction she's used to getting. But when you remain still, unshaken, unbothered, she's forced to sit with her own chaos. And that's often the moment the game begins to shift. She realizes she can't control you with her moods. She can't throw you off course. And whether she admits it or not, that quiet strength hits harder than any words ever could. Because most people aren't used to being met with calm when they throw fire. They're used to gasoline. So when you respond with stillness, it disarms them. It forces them to recalibrate. Now let's be clear. Emotional control doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means you don't respond impulsively. It means that if someone consistently disrespects you, you address it directly without emotional escalation. You say, I don't allow people to speak to me like that, and then you walk away if it continues. You show that you don't need to yell or argue to mean what you say. Your actions are your voice. This kind of emotional discipline also gives you a massive advantage in every area of life, at work, in friendships, in public. You become the man people turn to when things fall apart because they know you don't panic. You don't react. You respond. And that trait, especially in a world full of emotionally reactive people, is rare and it's respected. In romantic relationships, it becomes a quiet test. Women will naturally push boundaries, not maliciously, but instinctively. They want to know, can this man handle pressure? Can he stay grounded when I am emotional? And if you can't, if you react to every wave she throws at you, she'll feel it, even if she doesn't say it, and the respect will slowly begin to fade. But when you remain calm, not because you're detached, but because you've mastered your emotions, she sees that she can trust your presence. She sees that you're not easily shaken. And that, more than charm, status, or good looks, creates lasting attraction and deep respect. One of the most empowering things a man can do when dealing with a woman who doesn't respect him is to pull back his attention. It sounds simple, almost passive, but in reality, it's one of the most active demonstrations of self-worth. Attention is currency. And just like financial currency, if you give it away freely, especially to someone who treats you poorly, it loses its value. When a woman starts to disrespect you, ignore your boundaries, or show disregard for your presence, your instinct might be to fix things. You may double down, try harder, text more, explain your worth, or prove yourself to her. But all of that effort only communicates one thing, that you're desperate for her validation, that her attention or approval is more valuable than your self-respect. And once she senses that, it's game over. The dynamic shifts entirely and not in your favor. Pulling back your attention isn't about playing games. It's about realigning the balance of power by showing that you do not chase those who treat you poorly, that you do not beg for time, affection, or recognition. When a man starts giving his time and energy to someone who undermines him, he's slowly digging a hole he won't easily climb out of. But when he takes a step back, not with anger, not with revenge in mind, but with dignity, something powerful happens. He reminds her, and more importantly, himself, of his value. Women respect men who value their time and energy. When you pull back, you give her space to realize what she's been taking for granted. You stop being a background presence she can treat however she pleases and start becoming a man she has to actually consider. Often women test boundaries not consciously, but instinctively. They push to see what they can get away with. And every time you react by overgiving, you reinforce the idea that you'll tolerate poor treatment just to keep her close. But when you remove your attention, when you stop being immediately available, when you stop responding to every provocation, when you stop showing up for someone who doesn't value you, it disrupts that pattern. She begins to feel the shift. The absence and that silence often speaks louder than any argument or confrontation ever could. It's not about being cold or emotionally unavailable. You don't need to be bitter or vengeful. You just need to be focused elsewhere, on yourself, your growth, your peace. Start investing that same energy you once poured into chasing her into your fitness, your work, your mindset. Let her see you evolving without her at the center of your world. There's a quiet strength in a man who walks away from disrespect with grace. A man who doesn't need to slam the door or make a scene. He just pulls back, no explanation needed. That kind of detachment doesn't come from a place of insecurity. It comes from a deep understanding of one's worth. Because the truth is, when someone repeatedly disrespects you, they're betting on your fear of losing them, counting on your need for closeness, overriding your need for respect. But when you flip that, when you make it clear that no connection is worth your dignity, they either adjust or they leave. And either outcome is a win for you. If she respects your pullback and begins to treat you better, you've shifted the dynamic in your favor. If she continues with the same behavior or exits your life entirely, she's made room for someone who will value you as you deserve. Too many men waste years in relationships where they're not seen, not appreciated, and not respected, all because they don't believe they have the strength to walk away. But here's the truth. You don't need to chase what pulls you down. The more you pull back your attention from what drains you, the more power you gain. You become less reactive, more selective, and ultimately more attractive, not just to others, but to yourself. Your attention is sacred. Don't hand it out like loose change. Let it be earned. Let it be a reward for behavior that matches your standards. And when you do that, you not only change how others treat you, you transform how you see yourself. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is to walk away entirely, not with drama, not with ultimatums, just with a calm and quiet decision that says, I no longer accept this. Walking away from a woman who consistently disrespects you isn't weakness, it's the highest form of self-respect. It is the moment you finally draw the line, not to punish her, but to protect your own identity, your peace, and your dignity. Because the truth is, some people will never respect you until you show them that their behavior has consequences. and you remain in a relationship or situation where you're constantly being diminished, questioned, insulted, or manipulated, you begin to erode from the inside out. Every time you let it slide, you chip away a piece of your own self-esteem. You teach yourself that this is acceptable, that love looks like discomfort, that respect is optional. And over time, you lose touch with the version of you that once had standards, pride, and self-worth. But walking away changes the narrative. It's not just a message to her, it's a declaration to yourself. It says, I choose me. It says, I am no longer willing to shrink so someone else can feel powerful. And that's what walking away really does. It restores your personal power. It doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean you weren't willing to work things out. It just means you finally realized that no amount of effort can fix what someone isn't willing to change. There is a tendency, especially among men with good hearts, to try and fix everything, to prove their worth, to wait for the other person to see their value. But some women only respond to boundaries, not words. They'll test how far they can push, how much they can disrespect you and still have you stay. Every time you stay after being disrespected, you teach her that her behavior has no cost. But the moment you leave, everything changes. Now she's left with silence, with absence, with the realization that the man who once tolerated everything has finally reached his limit. And that's not revenge, it's reality. You didn't leave to make her suffer. You left because you refused to suffer. You refused to keep fighting for someone who wouldn't even meet you halfway. When you walk away with dignity, you don't need to explain yourself. Your absence is the message. And you do it not for her to regret it, but for you to remember what it means to stand tall again. Because staying too long in toxic or disrespectful environments damages your ability to love yourself. It clouds your judgment. You start to think this is normal, that maybe it's your fault. Walking away is how you break that illusion. And yes, it can be hard, especially if there are feelings involved. But hard doesn't mean wrong. In fact, the right decision often feels heavy at first. What helps is knowing that every step away from disrespect is a step back toward your authentic self, the version of you that knows peace, that attracts respect, that refuses to be mistreated. He's waiting for you on the other side of that decision. And here's the truth that a lot of men eventually learn. When you finally walk away, the world opens up. You begin to attract healthier relationships. You set a new standard, not just for how others treat you, but for how you treat yourself. You start to build a life where your peace is prioritized, where your voice is heard, and where you're no longer living under someone else's emotional weather. You don't walk away to win a power struggle. You walk away because your time, your energy, and your heart are no longer up for negotiation. You walk away because you understand that respect isn't optional, it's foundational. And when you take that stand, you don't just reclaim your strength, you elevate your entire life.